So we'll start the webinar.
That's good.
Okay, so recording is on. So
All right, great. Hello, thanks for joining us. We're going to be getting started with the webinar just about 5 minutes past the hour. So if you want to grab a coffee, you got them over here too. Hi, thanks for joining us. We're going to get started in just another minute or two. We still have a number of people coming in. Okay. Well, let's get started. Welcome and thank you for joining us today to hear more about creating a seamless experience with data fabric and application integration. I'm Rick Bushnell, coming to you from Philadelphia, just outside of our corporate offices in Princeton. And just a little bit about Pronix before we get started. So Pronix is well known as for our expertise in application development, cloud IT, QA testing, and DevOps. And we design and implement a number of data management and data transformation programs. Finally, we also provide IT augmentation to your IT teams and staff. So with over 85% of our consultants based here in the US, Pronix has become a leader for talent, both in your time zone and also even at your location. Today, we're going to hear from our president, Kishore Dhampudi, as well as a number of panelists that we brought together for you. Kishore, you've kind of put together this group. Do you want to give just a minute of introductions to everybody?
yeah, sure. So thank you all for joining. So myself, Kishore, I'm the VP of Digital Solutions here at Pronix. So with me, I have Venkat. He's a senior director of data management and product management at a well-reputed financial company. And we have Bhaskar Chittababu. He's a senior manager and data management expert at a financial services company. And we have Sanjay Tumula. So he's a chief technology and data strategist based out of Florida. So welcome all of you to the webinar. And I think we can get started.
All right, great. So once we get underway, provide any questions that you have in the chat window, and we'll try and take time at the end to make sure we answer them. Kishore, do you have the slides up? I can't see them right now.
Yes.
Great. So we're going to give Kishore and I are going to give a quick 5-minute foundational understanding, make sure everybody's at the same place on generally what is data fabric and application integration, kind of compare, contrast where the differences, and then talk about a couple real world examples as well as best practices and how it gets started. And then we'll be going through and having a conversation with the panelists, the people that you really want to get to hear from. Kishore, so if you just want to jump to the next slide, I think this is kind of the agenda topic. So I'm going to drop down and start with just an introduction to technology and what are the differences between data fabric and application integration. I think application integration has been around for a long time and lots of people have experience, but the challenge with application integration historically is it's a little bit brittle. tends to be application to application. And then we've really seen an evolution, Snowflake kind of kicking it off and most prominent today as being kind of bringing all that data together and creating a data fabric. So instead of creating every one-off integration, you instead have information that you can provide seamlessly, regardless of who the constituency or customer is internally. Might be an application, but it might be serving it up for information or consumption, might be different data provided in different formats and types, whether it's an application need for itself or potentially just inside of usage for a different client base. So we're really seeing that transformation with Data Fabric is not only are you able to get information to and from one system, but it really has improved the management of that data. It provides a way that you can have a data stored and a data owner to ensure that that data doesn't become stale. So, that's really, you can drop down to the next slide, 5, is where we've really seen that transformation and the benefit of starting to use Data Fabric. So you have not just the ability to get information, but to keep information current across the organization and enterprise. And obviously this makes it a lot simpler to scale and provide flexibility into different consumers. So instead of waiting for an integration team to provide and transform some piece of information, a lot of times you can even get to levels of self-service or a lot lighter, quicker projects to get people the information they need to and from different systems. So that's really what's made the movement and shift and interest that we're seeing using Data Fabric as well as your classic integration. And then I think Kishore, you pick up and talk just about a couple of real world examples that we've seen and go into the best practices for us.
Yeah, so we have seen a number of clients implementing Data Fabric especially last couple of years. And every company that's going towards digital transformation, so they're taking Data Fabric as a best case for removing all these silos and be able to make the integration seamless and have a place for querying data and analyzing data and reporting data, as well as all the applications that are consuming the data, or the entire enterprise from different operational data stores. So into one repository as a single point of data access. So we have seen with healthcare companies, we have seen with financial services companies, airlines, nonprofits, insurance companies. So we've seen several clients implementing Data Fabric very successfully. So if I have to recall, a couple of clients. So, for example, you have a health insurance company we've been working with. It's a nonprofit health insurance company, so they wanted to have the claims data. They want to have all the patient EHR related data, EMR related data, as well as all the interventions. So they want to have it in one place so that all the consuming applications, like for example, patient portals, claims administration applications, as well as the data, financial analytics applications. So they want to have instead of having independent operation data stores, so they want to actually have a unified repository, just like a data lake. But in the case of data lake, it's a different concept. You store structured, unstructured, but here it's all basically a structured data in terms of APIs, so that consuming applications, both internal and external applications, so they're able to consume, as well as the backend, analytics team, the internal, administration, claims administration, patient administration, provider contracts, provider gateways, claims gateways. So all of them can be able to access the single repository, and so they were able to improve, increase the revenue because they can see the visibility in one single repository, and they're able to manage, data flows, all the transformations, standardizations, governance. So all of them in one place. So similar to like MDM, master data management. So obviously with the network performance, you don't need to really call multiple applications in a different silos. So you save, basically you develop a single set of APIs for all of your enterprise data sets or enterprise silos into one single gateway, so that every application, both internal, external, backend, integrations, they all can be done with a single source. So that's one of the examples I could think of. So there are, a lot of best practices that, which actually still it's evolving concept, and people are coming up with as they're, implementing and lessons learned. So obviously there are some clear best practices here. So you have to have a, clear objectives, when to use data fabric and when not to use data fabric. So it's not for I will start with when not to use data fabric as per our experiences. If you have a single operation data store and you have a very small set of applications that are not having huge user base and the data size is very low, this is not the best framework to use. But if on the contrary you have a large number of operation data stores and you have multiple cross-functional applications talking to each other, and you have data that needs to be visible to the external, internal, and partners in a more complex manner, then definitely data fabric will be the right use case. So you have to define the clear objectives, what you want to achieve. Obviously, you have to remove the silos. You have to collaborate with the different teams to get them onto the same platform or a repository. And then obviously you have to establish the data governance, because you're dealing with the multiple silos, and be able to have that single repository source of truth. And then the creating different set of APIs, both for external consumers as well as internal consumers, and be able to implement connectors so that people can be able to connect from different platforms or different technology capabilities. So I think with that, so those are some of the best practices. We're going to discuss. We have the panelists, so we can be able to discuss much more practical, best practices that they have implemented in their projects. So I think, so how do you get started with the data fabric, right? So it's simple. We normally follow 4 simple steps. So we access the current state to see what are all the different silos, different pain points, different challenges that they're facing with the, first the databases itself, SQL, non-SQL, traditional, and then all the integration points between the apps and data, both internal and external, and what kind of governance they're using. So basically analyze the entire current state of the technical debt and also the technical landscape with respect to the data management, right? Plus the application integration. So it's a combination of both, actually. And then we develop the implementation roadmap based on the objectives and different solutions that are available for solving the pain points. And then we do a pilot project with any client that we start with normally, so that you can start with, you can take maybe 3 silos, which are very critical for the organization, and then create this repository and show the success factors and the outcomes, and then be able to, kind of implement full blown. And then obviously how to put the monitoring and evaluate as we mature, as we onboard, we create the intake process, we onboard different, silos to be part of the repository. Okay.
Excellent.
So I think with that, I will open up for the panel discussion. So Rick, it's back to you.
Sure. Thanks, Kishore. Venkat, we'll get started with you leading it off. So how do data fabric technologies differ for you from kind of traditional approaches to data management?
Yeah, thank you, Rick. Yeah, with respect to data fabric, and again, the concept behind it is not to repeat the data stores and replicate that data into multiple places, bring it for specific use cases, but to keep the data where it exists and try to put a layer on top of it to be able to then have the ability to bring that data from different existing stores together for use for your to satisfy your use cases, right? Mm-hmm. With that being the background, there are a couple of important things that you have to worry about now. How would you then achieve that goal, right? You need to be able to define those ground rules, mostly around the data governance and the aspects of how you're going to build the metadata around the data that exists and the relationships that you have to talk about. I know from my experience, we have slowly drift off from putting a good data model together because of the proliferance of non-structured and structured data, more non-structured data. But for data fabric to be successful, you need to probably focus more on putting that metadata layer together with proper relationships, so that then you're able to see the commonalities and able to link data across the various data stores that you have. One of the examples that I can give you is in my line of work where we have a customers loaded into Salesforce or onboarded onto Salesforce, and Salesforce has its own underlying data store, whereas all my transactions that we support through the REST API calls, they are in a Cloudera supported data warehouse. Now, whenever we have to do anything, any request specific to a customer or any of those, I need to link that data together. The traditional way of things would be get the data from Salesforce, get the data from the lakehouse, whatever is required, put that together, put an ETL solution in between, and then expose that data through whatever mechanisms you want to. But with this technology evolution, we can leave the stores they are. You don't have to replicate. Build a strong metadata layer with proper governance and insight and back and forth discussions, pretty lengthy ones, to ensure that you get the view that you need, and then expose that data from both of those stores through an API mechanism or any mechanism that you can interact with that data, and then have that make that possible. So the investment is not away, is taken away from doing the replication of data, buying additional storage, to putting that effort in defining a proper data model and relationship so that you can make use of that data, and relatively less hardware footprint and potentially great value out of that solution.
Excellent. Great. Thanks for running us through what you've already experienced. Bhaskar, any other thoughts or things that you guys have had to use it for so far, use cases?
Sure. I guess the main difference, what I see with the data fabric, right? Data fabric is now a word that's been thrown out in the world, people who are dealing with data, right? So like Venkat talked about extensively, that how it differs is exactly how you process this data and how you own the data, right? There are a lot of systems in an enterprise that keeps generating the data. You got Salesforce generating data, you're collecting user experience, you're getting a feedback from the customers who are using your product. How are you going to collect all this to get a meaningful decision, right? And the traditional model is a little bit time consuming because you need to first get all the data in the pillars, and basically in the traditional strategy, all of these domain owners will be owning the data, and they choose what data to expose to the enterprise service bus to see the data, what data they wanted to see. Instead, you bring in the data and then you define your ground rules. What is your objective? What you wanted to solve? And then you see what data you wanted to look at to solve that problem. And you have the data right in front of you. So you go take a look at it, explore it, and arrive at the decision quicker and faster than the traditional method. And that's where data fabric stands unique and different.
Nice. Sanjay, just for you, differences in kind of your experience, how you guys are dealing with it?
Yes. So I guess I probably have a slightly different take on this. So the way I view data fabric is it's really nothing new. If you really look at the different components, right? I mean, we've been doing that for, I don't want to give away my age, but we've been doing it for decades and decades. The concepts are not new, right? It's been attempted before. What has changed is the evolution of the technologies and the bandwidth, right? Where, for example, the concept of, okay, keep the data where it is and try to analyze it by building a layer on top of that is not really new. It's been attempted before. What has changed is the bandwidth and the technologies and the explosion of open source tools, where now you have so many options to actually make it happen, right?
Mhm.
But you still cannot take away some of the underlying themes that folks so far have been talking about, which is, first thing is you need a strong executive sponsorship
Okay.
that there's buy-in. It's because anytime, like Kishore rightly pointed out, this is not for organizations where, they have a little bit of data here and there. This is, data fabric is not for folks like that. This is for really large enterprises where there's, petabytes and zettabytes of data, and that it's for folks like those. And by definition, it's going to be extremely complex, right? And
Yeah.
if you look at Gartner studies, almost 80% of BI projects actually fail,
Mhm.
despite spending billions and billions of dollars. 80% fail. That's a staggering number.
Yeah.
And same goes for data fabric, where some of the ground rules that Kishore very succinctly put out is you really need the executive sponsorship. You need to be very, very clear on your goals. And more importantly, a lot of times in large projects like this, what gets overlooked or doesn't get enough attention is, what is the real business outcome that you're trying to achieve for this project,
Right. Right.
right? Because you can throw in all the terms, you can throw in all the latest tools, means nothing
Mhm.
if you're not meeting a business objective, right? So as long as those 3 points are clear,
Okay.
then you're setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, great. No, thanks for adding that. Yeah, think about the executive sponsorship is important. All right, Bhaskar, I'm going to have you start off. So what are the key benefits of adopting data fabric that you've seen for data management?
So with data fabric, what I see is the opportunity to explore data. And like Sanjay was saying, they have been doing this before. What's the
Mhm.
difference is the time to market, right?
Okay.
Time to market. So when you have a set objective, when you have a set problem in front of you, and how soon can you address that problem?
Yeah.
Being in a financial industry, one of the things that people wanted to do is the data loss model, right? Loss model.
Okay.
How's my loss model looking at? They usually take
Mhm.
about years and years to build one, and then they try to implement it, and they try to stick onto it. They try to hang on to it because they know it's been working, right? But always there is a question: what if there is a better model out there?
Right.
But that's a question. That's a problem statement. But how quickly can you solve it today, right?
Okay.
You're talking about 3 years down the line. 3 years is my turnaround time. 2 years is my turnaround time. Instead, what data fabric here by that terminology offers is it's an architecture, right? It's an architecture change. By definition of data fabric, you need to re-architect or rethink your data in a way that you are able to provide a platform where people can query across cloud, across different domains. Like
Yeah.
today, like I was saying before, there you have data collected from various sources, but they are being stored in different places. And in any large enterprises, like Sanjay was mentioning, if they
Yeah.
have a terabyte and zettabyte data, it's not going to be saved all in one database or all in one cloud.
Sure.
You're talking about some being saved in Google Cloud, some in Azure, some in AWS. So how are you going to bring all that into one to do that cross metric, right? So
Mhm.
data fabric is an architecture design that someone has to think about to put in all of these data together so you can query the data seamlessly across different platforms. So that's where the time to market comes into picture, right? How
Yeah.
soon can I get that to solve my problem? So the turnaround time, if you implement it in a right way, the data fabric, the turnaround time to produce those loss model is, if it takes about X amount of time, you're going to reduce it
Yeah.
by half or even lower, right?
Wow.
If it is done in the right way, then that's the advantage that I see. How you wanted to re-architect this, and of
Yeah.
course, it's also the right asking the right questions and understanding the right infrastructure, right? Assessing your existing infrastructure. How are you?
Right.
So anything that you wanted to start with starts with a question, right? A need is the mother of invention, right? What is your need? And then you need to evaluate your current infrastructure, right? Is my current infrastructure, how quickly can it address, first of all, the problem? If it addresses, great. But how soon can it address? Yeah, you asked me for this last model. Here you go. After 4 years, I delivered it. Okay, well, things change after that. There's a COVID hit.
Right.
So this model doesn't apply anymore, right? So how quickly and dynamically can it change?
Okay.
So then if that is important to you, and you need to get a buy-in from the business sponsorship right there, they're going to
Sure.
say, okay, you know what? My current infrastructure addresses my problem, but it takes time. So,
Yeah.
so here's the budget, here's the need, go figure out what you need to do. Then you start with the evaluation. Can your current infrastructure support to do this change, right?
Yeah.
Then comes the evaluation, then comes the product evaluation. Then you put in the process in place and see how you can implement the data fabric.
Excellent.
So yeah, I know you asked about the benefits, but the benefits really comes out when you have all these spaces figured out.
Sure. But I think that makes sense. I mean, it's time to market, speed for all the organization, being able to be responsive has just become such a massive driver of decisions and justification for a lot of investment. Sanjay, anything else that you've seen as kind of key drivers to motivate people for making these investments and change inside the organization?
Yeah, I think incremental approach would be best advised. I think it was Kishore who was mentioning that.
Right.
See, by nature, these are all going to be pretty large initiatives. So if you can gain some quick wins, that's how you kind of, increase confidence.
Self-funding.
Because, yeah, because I mean, it's being in the industry for so long, it's sometimes unfortunate where large initiatives, when you don't do it properly, like Bhaskar was just mentioning, it's just one sentence, but it's easier said than done. So you really need right. So you really need a lot of thought process to go into it, and going into specific use cases, and take a few, show some quick wins, and then gain confidence, and then that's how you keep going with that. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, no, great point. So that kind of, we avoid the big bang thing, and we also avoid the disappointment at the end of the project when it just didn't meet an end state. So you get that whole iterative, kind of like agile approach to business justification. Venkat, for you, benefits, kind of what's driving the investment that you're getting inside the organization? Kind of how do you get your stakeholders to want to make that initial investment?
Yeah, I mean, I echo the sentiment from both Sanjay and Bhaskar. The benefit is in the need, as long as you're able to support the need. But most of the time, the problem is that you have this big vision, and that big vision, you try to chase after it. And it's so enticing that, oh, in 5 years, I'm going to make the best of the world. And that best of the world keeps moving, right? Because things keep changing, and you're going to be ever chasing that goal, and you're not satisfying the business need. So in my experience, I have failed a couple of times with that strategy. So experience speaks.
That takes sorry to jump in, but that takes a lot of courage. For saying that. Yeah. A lot of people, a lot of us don't accept that. Thanks for that, Venkat.
So the learnings from that is, you always start slow. With the aim for your big vision, ensure that your model is extensible. And there are times when you'll have to rejiggle little things here and there, or sometimes scratch it because you were not able to fit the other use cases that come along. But giving that business value to the users as you go along will keep them engaged, and they would want to invest more and get more as long as you show value. The big bang doesn't work from my experience.
Well, I appreciate the candor and honesty. I think everybody likes that here. We've all dealt with the reality. And I think it's really takes the making changes after those experiences is what we're all looking for, right? Try and save each other. One minor incident would be great, save me the pain. Sanjay, I want to switch over to you to kick us off. So kind of switching gears a little bit, how does Data Fabric enable data democratization, and what impact are you seeing it having across the organization?
Yeah. So, again, with all these technologies, now it's possible to really, without having to move a lot of data. I mean, there's still some use cases where you might have to do it, right? So it's not completely eliminated, but that speed to market that Bhaskar was talking about, but again, you'll see me keep going back to involving business heavily in these initiatives, because when you say data democratization, right, there's a lot of benefits, obviously, for folks in one part of the organization to have access to another division, if you will, or LOB's data. But that LOB or division is the one who really knows the data well, right? So unless you set some ground rules and also build your APIs and to have tools in place where that access and data stewardship, right? A lot of times that gets overlooked, and data access to people who really shouldn't have access to the data will end up having access to that data. So it's again a very thoughtful process, and so incremental approach would be good, and then the benefits are obviously immense, right? Because let's say, I'll give you an example of a CRO firm where I helped build their entire analytics infrastructure. So now there, for folks who don't know what a CRO is, it's a contract research organization where, in pharma industry, what happens is the drug companies like Pfizer or of the world, they are very good at actually inventing a drug, but then after that, to actually take it to the market through clinical trials, getting approval from FDA, that is something not in their expertise domain. So then they go to the CROs who take that drug, see it through clinical trials, and then basically take it to market. So now coming back to our use case, so the sales guys are there. They sold they sold a certain number of protocols with the drug company, and then now you have to do trials, and by its very nature, medicine, you have to have clinical trials across the world, across different ethnicities, cultures. So now where a holistic view of your data will come into play is when let's say there's labs, okay? There might be labs for following these protocols in a low-cost country, but then you're also doing the clinical trial in a higher cost country.
Sure.
So by having that holistic view, you already sold the product, but then you can increase your margins by getting most of the work in a lower cost country.
Right.
So that's where we were able to really make a significant impact to the profitability of the whole sales, and really have a direct impact to the EBITDA by doing things like that. So that's where really it can impact the bottom line if you take the correct use cases and implement it properly.
Great. Wow, that's interesting. I like that. The whole background to the line of business is great. Thank you. I'll switch over to you. Data democratization inside the organization, kind of what has that facilitated or allowed people to do that historically they weren't doing?
I would say that is the underlying premise on which this architecture has evolved. Right? Like Sanjay rightfully put it, it's not something that is new. It's just a new way, new wine in an old bottle, or the other way, whichever way we take it. But it's the same. I mean, the concept is not new. It's just the
Sure.
expanse at which you have the opportunity to apply, and the evolution of other technologies that are enabling you to think in that direction is where the benefit comes out of it, right? The bells and whistles that you have to really worry about is that security of that data, because now you never thought about exposing that data that you are dealing with locally in your silo. You might have put controls within your organization, but now you're exposing that data across the organization. So you need to really hone in and make sure that security is thought through properly.
Okay.
And that again, the strength of your data fabric solution is that metadata layer that you're going to build, and that becomes the key when you try to democratize that data across the silos. Yeah.
Great point. Yeah. Good. Bhaskar, anything else that kind of you've experienced?
Data democratization, right? So
Yeah.
in every company, always there's going to be somebody who's saying, I don't have enough data to produce reports. I'm missing this. I'm missing that key element. I'm not able to see what the ordering is done. I'm not able to see how much of the interest impact is going to be. So always the question is, I always want more data to be able to give you a holistic view of the reporting, right? At least I've seen that in most of the companies. That's why if you look into any of the executive dashboard, you have like 10 slides, each talking about their own silos department, but there is not a slide that talks about the holistic view of the company. How is it doing? It's just not there because it is hard to put that slide up there, integrating all of those data together.
Sure.
So I believe what was Sanjay or Venkat who was saying, one is, make the data available to all of these users, but does the user have the knowledge to pull the data across different departments to arrive at a meaningful report, to have that conversation, to arrive at that statement saying, you know what, we are actually doing good, looking at the ordering and the billing and the payments that's been received, because now I see from end to end, it all makes sense, right? But if the user who is not able to think cross-departmental or cross-functional teams, it's going to be hard for them to do it. And in fact, that's where the need gets killed, right?
Yeah.
If an organization have users who have that broad perspective, who can interconnect those data to come up with that meaningful decision or the futuristic predictions of their company, then that's where the data fabric is going to kick in and help them out. Because and it also depends on how many users do you have that kind of mentality who can connect different dots to arrive at that decision for you, right? So data democratization, yes, the data is available to you, but who is your user base? Are they able to arrive at the meaningful report by combining all of these data points together, right? And I think it was Venkat who said, you also have, one of the challenges that the company is going to have is customers' information. So for example, when a customer places an order, they could be living in a different state and address and all together. Like 2 years down the line, they could be moved to the service address to something else, right? If somebody wants to pull up and say, how is this dealer doing, right? You're not going to pull up with their customer's current address and say, this dealership really did well. No, actually, they got it in somewhere else. The customer actually moved to a different state, right? So, but the fact is, where I'm going with this is, when you look at the address of the customer, right? I am from the compliance department. I'm going to say, get your current address. That's you. That's the right one, right? But for this information to derive at, you don't need the current address. You actually need the address when the order was placed, right? So the data becomes invalid depending on what question you're trying to address. So with the data democracy being there, data is there everywhere, right? So if I am a user, if I don't realize this nuances, I'm going to pull up a wrong information and tell you, oh, by the way, let's just fund that dealer who's been performing so good for us, and then I'm totally wrong because my analysis is wrong, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
on one end, you always have this user thirsty for data, but then if the users were not provided with the data, what they're trying to address, they may end up with the wrong conclusion.
Okay. Yeah.
So just like any other invention, data fabric is an awesome thing that's out there. But if it's also a
Use the right
sister, right?
way.
Use it the right way, right? It could end up in a wrong way if it if it hands up in a wrong person or in a wrong perception.
Right. No, that's a
So
good
it's
point of
just
view.
we
That's
wanted to caution
definitely,
on that.
yeah, I like it. You guys have each kind of given a different angle on it. It's good to think about. All right, well, let's go through just one last question. And Venker, I'm going to start with you. We've talked a lot about the data fabric part, but let's go back for a minute and talk about what role does data integration have in kind of an effective data fabric solution?
See that again, it's a very overloaded word, data integration, because there's not an IT solution without data integration, right? So everything that you do, wherever and whenever you started, right? It involves some kind of integration through whatever mechanisms we have. This one is a really a new thought of keeping the data where you are. Or where it is. And mostly, if you think about, there is more and more people moving into clouds and having hybrid setups of data, and a lot of social engineering related data coming in your way that will help you improve your bottom line, as long as you're able to make the best use of the data that you have captured. Right.
Yep.
With that, then the whole point of this data fabric architecture is your ability to keep the data where you have it and be able to put a facade in front of it to be able to then mix and merge and make the best use of it. Like any technology, like Sanjay Bhaskar rightly pointed out, there is always good and bad for any technology, any solution, anything that you get out, right? As simple as driving a car. As long as you drive well, it works well. You don't want to get into an accident, right? So there are goods and bads. You just make sure that you educate your business users who are providing their requirements to basically avoid those potholes and potentially not fall in the trap, and make the best use of it to provide the integration that they are looking for and get the business value. Like Kishore put it out, that you define your objectives. As long as you define your objectives clearly and you're able to navigate through to achieve those objectives in a slow and steady fashion rather than going the big bang, I think we're going to see this kind of proposal evolve and become more part of a common stream in the future. Again, the more successful implementations also drive some of these architectures, and the more unsuccessful ones, then it'll fade away because people now have burnt their hands too many times and they don't want to pursue it.
Good. Well, let's because we're getting to the top. I'm going to actually switch, and Bhaskar I'm going to switch the question on you. So I hopefully weren't overthinking the implementation side, but maybe kind of an evolution of that. What are the challenges that you have seen and you gave us a couple of them, facing when you're kind of going through implementation of data fabric solutions? And then what have you done to overcome them, probably out of the experience of earlier ones?
So for that, I'm going to recall the slide which Kishore was just presenting, right? So it has the phases. You got to go through the phases of the implementation of data fabric, which starts from your objective. What are you trying to solve, right? Are you trying to solve the data democratization, where you want to equip and empower the users to be able to collect data from different sources and then put together and then play with it and then arrive at a business decision. Is that what you're trying to solve? Or
Yeah.
you're trying to solve the cross-cultural departmental data to be able to pull and arrive at meaningful data out of it. Like, for example, you have certain data in Google Cloud, and you have some other data in AWS sitting in there, you have some of the data that is in Azure. How are you going to cross-platform it? Is that what you're trying to do? So assess your current needs, and then assess your current state, right? Where you are, right? Where is my company stand from the infrastructure point of view? Then you kind of develop the roadmap trying to solve that problem. So when you're trying to develop a roadmap, you have to keep in mind what problem you're trying to solve, right? You cannot deviate from that goal, from your end goal.
Okay.
Then so you first comes your assessment, right? If my company is at having all the traditional approach, following all the legacy data, legacy too old of the systems, everything is on-prem, nothing is in cloud, or if everything is being stored in single operational data store, probably right there, I'm going to be changing a lot to implement to where I want to go. Whereas if I'm already on a cloud, if I'm already structured my data in a way, there's a data lake exists, there's a data integration that exists, there's a data governance pillar that already exists, there's a data quality that is in place. If all of these pillars already exist, then it is a little easier for me to move and then implement to where I want to. So the biggest challenge is going to be this: assessment of your current infrastructure and where you are with your modernization. So data modernization, right? Everybody talks about it. Certain company doesn't really or miss to do that. So it's going to be hard for them to adapt to data fabric because they're already behind in the game, right? But if you are in the game, even if you're not in the top of the game, but if you are there, you already have some sort of a pillars already exist in your company, then you could take that safe measure of moving ahead. So the biggest challenge is going to be identifying those pillars. Do you have those pillars already built, and what you're trying to solve?
Very good.
So that's a challenge.
Yeah, and how you guys have dealt with it and overcome it. I appreciate that. All right, Sanjay, let's get you one last question, and then we'll try and wrap up. This has been super interesting to me. So you're familiar with regulated industries. What are you, and compliance, how are you guys handling data compliance inside of data fabric, and how do you make sure that everybody's staying kind of in their lane, the data is managed?
Yeah. So this is, obviously not a new problem. I guess the key thing there is, I guess for one of the earlier questions, I kind of partly addressed this, which is involving business heavily in this and really make them understand the importance of the role of a data steward, right? Data steward is, I guess you probably never say never, but I would say 99% of the time, a data steward should be from business, not from IT, right? Because they are the ones who really decide who has access to the data. And then with a lot of the tools that are available now, you're able to kind of restrict the data. And the security of the data is also very, very important, right? I mean, when you say, okay, I went into the database and I'm giving access only to this particular person or application, but then what happens to it after that? And what happens to it, especially now that, the data is distributed in really across the world, what happens when I query a data? Okay, I'm trying to get data from multiple sources. What happens to the data both in transit and while at rest, right?
Yeah.
So are you encrypting your data while in motion? So a lot of these issues, so that by itself, I guess we could have a separate session just on that topic.
For sure.
Right? And a lot of times, I mean, and despite, having large budgets, I mean, you keep hearing these data breaches and everything.
Yeah.
And when they actually look at the causes for that, someone gave a very simplistic password. Or, I mean, you keep hearing these recurring themes, but for some reason that really, beats me why. there's some very simple things you can do to avoid this, right? And I guess probably this comes across as bragging, but I have a lot of domains, and the email for the email for that, I actually host email for those on my own server, right? And I've been doing that for probably past 10 years because I don't want to pay for each and every email that I have, right? And in the last 10 years, I just went through some very basic steps. And glad to say, in last 10 years, every single day, I probably get hundreds of pings and attempts to break in. And in 10 years, I've not been broken in. So, right. So those kinds of things, I mean, if you pay attention to some basic details, you can effectively secure your data and make sure that it's managed properly and the right people have access at the right time. And the time is also important because you might have a need for that data maybe this week. After that, you really don't have a need to look at that data, right?
Sure.
So all these aspects you have to look at thoroughly, and then implementation. There's a zillion tools available. So everyone, every tool has its own quirks. So you just need to kind of take that into account while you're implementing.
Right. Excellent. All right. Well, that's a bunch to think about. Appreciate it. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for taking the time out. It's, I think most imperative and interesting to everybody is other people that are in the field solving the same problems and how they're doing it. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and experience with the collective. We're going to be, this session's been recorded. We're going to be providing the recording and then a copy of the slides to you for your own participation. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Kishore, anything else that you wanted to share from the organization before we let everybody go for the day and enjoying a long weekend if you're here in the States? Well, wait, you don't have you're muted.
That's a usual
There we
problem.
go.
Right? So thank you all for attending, especially the panelists. You spent 1 hour discussing. So I think it's definitely valuable insights. So definitely we're going to share this with some of our clients who are really looking for these kind of solutions and the future ones. So yeah, so thank you all again. So I think I don't have anything to add. So wonderful insights and wonderful experiences being shared. Yeah, I'm good.
Great.
Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Take care. Bye for now.
Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjay.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Ricky.